This crime took place in Arizona in 2011. But we start at the beginning. Amy Lynn Deal was born on July the 24th, 2000 in Pennsylvania. Her mother, Shirley Deal, was married to David Deal when she got pregnant. Shirley says that she was seeing someone else at the time she got pregnant, so it's not known if David is actually Amy's father. Before Amy was born, Shirley and David already had two children. Shirley and David lived together until Shirley moved with her children in Pennsylvania to stay with her mother. Shirley and the kids eventually moved back in with David and his mother Judith Deal and sister Cynthia Stoltzman in Texas. And then they eventually moved to Phoenix, Arizona. Shirley said that David's family treated her like a slave, calling her names and abusing her, but that they never hurt the kids. Shirley also said that her family kicked her out and she moved to Lola, Kansas without her children. Regarding Amy herself, neighbors said that she was abused often and that she was forced to walk back and forth on the sidewalk barefoot when it was very hot in Phoenix. At other times, they abused her with a paddle called a butt buster and made her eat hot sauce and dog poop. That's so sickening. It was said that this was the punishment for lying or stealing food. Amy and the other kids were supposedly homeschooled when they lived in Phoenix. David was said to live in a tent with his two other children in the backyard of the family's home. Amy was also forced to sleep in the shower stall without bedding because sometimes she wet her bed. The family itself had often moved and lived in Pennsylvania, Utah, Texas, and Arizona. At one point, when the family lived in Wisconsin, the local child protective services were called because of the disgusting conditions of their residence. And before they moved to Arizona, they were in Utah, where school officials claimed that they had reported many incidences of abuse and neglect about the family's children to the authorities. School officials claimed that Amy and her siblings came to school filthy. They said Amy often had head lice and once had cat urine on her shoes. What kind of sick people are these? The only way you allow a child to be this bad or unhygienic is through laziness. Ew. Police claimed that the other children instigated situations to get Amy in trouble. The children were also persuaded to lie about why and how Amy once ended up in the trunk of their car to police. I'm not gonna lie, I don't even want to know why she was in there. What the hell are these adults playing at? When asked why Amy was treated so badly, it was said she was mentally a little slow, but that's it. Witnesses also said the children were often seen wandering the streets until very late at night with hardly any clothes on. On occasions, they were without diapers or shoes. One neighbor said that he saw babies in high chairs eating in front outside of the house late at night. I'm now going to get into the details of the crime itself. You see, in Phoenix, Amy had been living with her grandmother, Judith, and Cynthia Stoltzman, the aunt and legal guardian of Amy. Also living there was Cynthia's daughter, Samantha, and her husband, John Allen. They were both 23, and in the house there was 12 or more children. So to confirm, Samantha and John were married. And don't forget, David was also living in the back in a tent with his kids. In the house, you also had a girl named Cassandra. She was Samantha's cousin. And at this moment in the story, I couldn't find anywhere on what happened to the biological mother Shirley, except that she may have gone to Kansas, which is the last the family heard at this juncture of the story. So the biological mother is no longer in the picture. Seems like she just upped and left, which is no surprise given the conditions Amy was living in. Samantha and John themselves were part of a large family that drifted through the residence at West Romley Street. And in the home, there was a 31-inch long storage box, which some of the kids at one point used to store their Barbie doll collection. Now, at the beginning, in the spring of 2011, Samantha, John, Cynthia, and David began placing Amy in the box as a form of punishment. Even though Amy did not fit in it at all, the box itself was 21 inches shorter than her height. Now, on July the 11th, 2011, Judith rewarded the kids and Amy with a popsicle for completing their chores. That evening, one of the kids heard John yelling at Amy for stealing a popsicle. As punishment, Samantha and John forced Amy to stand against the wall with her hands up and her head held away, a standard form of punishment from the Allens called wall stands. When one of the kids came out of her room for dinner around 7:30 p.m., she saw that the Allens was still punishing Amy by forcing her to do back bends, and that Amy was crying and exclaiming that she was in pain. When the kids went to bed around 9 p.m., Amy was still crying and doing back bends, as Samantha and John continued punishing Amy into the night. Amy was ordered to drag the box from the patio into a room inside the house known as the classroom. Because the box's latch was known to be unreliable, John went to get a padlock, which only he had the key to, while Samantha waited with Amy and obstructed the classroom's only exit. John returned and, with Samantha standing by, ordered Amy into the box, closed the lid, and locked it. This was the punishment they had for this girl because she allegedly stole a popsicle. Do you know how stupid that is? My son is 3. Every day he runs to the freezer, he grabs the popsicle. He knows we don't want him to have it. He can have it, of course, but we don't want him to have too much sugar. But this is just what kids do. Punish him in a box? Imagine that. The Allens then went to their bedroom and fell asleep, leaving Amy contorted inside the locked box in a non-air conditioned room in Phoenix during the summer, where she asphyxiated and died. The classroom itself was a converted garage and did not have air conditioning, unlike the rest of the home. Now, the Phoenix Police Department, one of their officers, Albert Salays, responded to a 911 call about an injured child and arrived at the West Romley home at 8:30 a.m. on July the 12th, 2011. Salays entered a room where a woman was performing chest compressions on Amy, who was lying on the floor on a towel. Officers recorded the ambient temperature in the classroom, and it was 95 degrees, and the box's interior was approximately 97 degrees. Amy was lying in a curled position, her lips were discolored, and she appeared to be dead. John told Salays that Amy and the other children had been playing hide and seek the night before, and that he had fallen asleep and found Amy in the box that morning. Child Help, a non-profit organization, later interviewed some of the kids who reiterated the same hide and seek story. Remember previously, they were trained to lie to police. At trial, however, one of the kids admitted they lied about that story because her family told her to. Now, the officers first learnt of this crime when Cassandra and her boyfriend Travis called police and told them about the abuse Amy was receiving, including confinement in the locked box. So on the 27th of July 2011, Samantha Allen and John Allen were arrested and questioned. During her interview, Samantha initially told a hide and seek story, although she admitted that John had previously confined Amy in the box. So you see how Samantha is now blaming her husband. Samantha claimed she did not know whether he had done so on the night of Amy's death. After this initial interview with Samantha, Detective Greg McKay allowed Samantha and John to speak alone in an interview room. As they spoke, officers monitored their conversation. John told Samantha that he had confessed and wanted to take full responsibility so she could remain with their 4 children. Samantha tried to comfort John with the notion that the only thing they're going to nail her with is child abuse. Both lamented that they had not stuck with the story, but Samantha explained that interviewing officers already knew they were lying. McKay then resumed Samantha's interview by confronting her about the monitored conversation with John and telling her that he knew both she and John were there when Amy was locked in the box. During their interview, Samantha admitted that she and John forced Amy to bring the box in from the patio. While John went to get the lock, she stayed with Amy and stood in the doorway, which was the only exit from the classroom. After John returned with the padlock, Amy was ordered into the box and Amy entered the box. John closed the lid and locked it shut as Samantha stood by. And after John locked Amy inside, the Allens lay down in their bedroom, and John rubbed Samantha's head while she complained that Amy was a difficult child until she fell asleep. Difficult child. The audacity. Although Samantha claimed she asked John to release Amy from the box, she admitted she never attempted to release Amy herself and fell asleep. Amy had bruises and abrasions on both her legs, including abrasions on her right knee, consistent with being pressed against the box lid. This was according to Dr. Keene, the medical examiner. Amy asphyxiated due to decreased air availability in the box, together with being in a chin down position that restricted her ability to have air exchange. It was also at least 97 degrees in the box, and Amy was covered in sweat when she was removed from it. Based on this evidence, a reasonable jury could find Amy suffered physical pain by being stuffed inside a hot, cramped box in an uncomfortable position that restricted her movements and breathing after already suffering muscle fatigue from her prior punishments. On the day she died, Amy only weighed 59 pounds at the age of 10. Remember, my son is 3 and he weighs 40 pounds. Not only was she suffocated, she was also malnourished, forced to eat dog poo, and just abused over and over again. Now, the medical examiner at first classed Amy's death as unknown. You see, the children in the home were all told to lie and say that Amy had gone into the trunk during a game of hide and seek. But John and Samantha, who again at the time were 23 years old, eventually admitted that they had locked her in the trunk. As for Cynthia and Judith, who also lived in the house, they were charged with child abuse and kidnapping after they admitted they had also locked Amy in the trunk at times. When asked why she suffered the abuse and other children did not, a witness said it was because Amy was always a little slow and that was the only reason given. And unfortunately, CPS, the Child Protective Services, was no stranger to this home. Calls had been made to complain about how the conditions in the home were filthy. In addition, when the family lived in Utah, CPS was called and a visit was made. School officials in Utah say they made repeated complaints to the CPS that there were signs of neglect and abuse. Jeline Boydston, the second grade teacher, who had Amy in her class, said that Amy was very bright and curious and that she always craved the attention of adults, adding that something just wasn't right at home. She said Amy was treated differently. There just wasn't the affection I could feel coming from the aunt towards Amy, and they would tell me they didn't really think Amy belonged to them. She was constantly coming to school dirty. She often had head lice. One time she came to school with cat urine on her shoes and it smelled so badly that the counselor came and cleaned her and got some shoes for her. That's disgusting and embarrassing. This counselor, Jody Hansen, said that frequent calls were made to the CPS to try and get help for Amy and the other children in the house, adding that it was easy to see that Amy was the scapegoat in the family and got the brunt of everything. Jody said she knew that there was an open case at the CPS with the family and that the CPS had been working with the family to teach them parenting skills. Not long after the visit started, the children were taken out of school and the family disappeared. It seems that there were witnesses who lived in tents and there were plenty of witnesses who saw what happened. These people saw what was happening to Amy, and none of them stood up to defend her or to report to the abuse in any way. One witness said that he could hear Cynthia yelling at Amy one night while abusing her and forcing her to sleep in the shower stall because she had wet herself. Another witness stated that she watched as Samantha put Amy in the footlocker and John would kick it and flip it over while Amy was inside of it. Let me reiterate, they'd put her into the box, lock it, and then John would kick it and it would flip over. And he'd kick it again and it would flip over. Amy was also forced to crush cans with her bare feet and exercise outside even in extreme weather. I mean, how could these people watch that happen and never report it? Is disgraceful. And at this point, the remaining children in the home were taken into custody by the CPS. Now, eventually, John Allen and his wife Samantha Allen were indicted on first-degree murder charges, one count of conspiracy to commit child abuse, and multiple counts of child abuse. The district attorney at the time, they said, this horrific case has deeply disturbed not only the citizens of our county, but people throughout the country, as it offends the essence of what it means to be a parent or guardian of a young child. Instead of caring for Amy, we are alleging that these family members utterly failed her. My office will spare no effort in seeking justice for Amy and ensuring the public has confidence in the result. John and Samantha pled not guilty. They were both being held on $500,000 bond. Also, in the month of August 2011, guess who showed up? Yes, her biological mother Shirley. Because she randomly, on Facebook, she read that her daughter was dead and that the family who was supposed to be taking care of her had killed her. In fact, she had the audacity at the time to say, "I trusted them with all my heart, and now it's broken." What do you mean it's broken? Where the hell were you? She went on to say, "It ain't never coming back. I'm not going to be done with it until something is done. They better stay in jail. They better stay in prison. They messed with my baby. They promised I could see her, but I haven't seen her in 6 years, and it feels like it's all my own fault." Now, Cynthia and Judith were both charged with multiple counts of child abuse for the ordeal they made Amy face. David, the father, remember he was still living in the house, wasn't charged with the murders, but he did plead guilty to attempted child abuse. Then, for some reason, David denied being Amy's father. You see, during the trial, a man came forward. His name was Kenneth Greast. Nobody knew who he was, but he claimed to be the father of Amy, and he wanted to prove it if he could take a DNA test. Kenneth said that he and Shirley were involved in a relationship when she became separated from David. Ever since her birth, Kenneth says that he had the suspicion that he was her father, even though David's name is on the birth certificate. According to Kenneth, Shirley was intimidated by David and eventually went back to him when he was living in Texas. Amy and Shirley moved in with David, however. Shirley says he became abusive and she left, leaving Amy with David and his family. Kenneth speculated that the reason Amy was treated so badly was because the family knew she was not related to them by blood. I think that's a fair point. And that he tried over and over to find the family and get Amy from them, adding that it was impossible since they moved around so much. Kenneth would have liked to have done a DNA test, but apparently the detective who was handling the case did not return his calls. Now, Samantha Allen was sentenced to death. The decision at the Maricopa County Superior Court led to Samantha becoming the third woman to be sentenced to death in Arizona. The woman had been previously found guilty of first-degree murder and 4 counts of child abuse prior to sentencing. The death sentencing makes her the 55th woman on death row in America. Samantha's sentencing comes despite the judge, Teresa Sanders, asking the jury to consider her age, her dysfunctional upbringing, and the fact that she had no prior criminal record. However, after a week of deliberating, the jury determined the horror of the crime outweighed all possible exceptions to a life sentence instead. In fact, the jury said at the time, "We, the jury, impaneled and sworn in the above entitled actions upon our oaths, have considered all the facts and circumstances unanimously, and we find that the defendant should be sentenced to death." Samantha put her head down and sobbed as the verdict was read. She didn't care what happened to the child, it was all about what was going to happen to her. The jury said that they were looking for something from her, something to show remorse, but her face was cold. Another juror added, "I think the hardest thing for us all was the victim and learning about what her life really entailed and the years of abuse that she suffered." The jurors all agreed Samantha did not seem to be sorry about her role in Amy's death. One of them said, "A lack of remorse is the biggest thing that played into it for us, that we didn't see from Samantha throughout the whole process." Now, as for David Deal, he pled guilty to attempted child abuse and was sentenced to 14 years in prison in 2013. Remember David, the biological father. Cynthia pleaded guilty to 2 counts of child abuse and 1 count of attempted child abuse. In 2013, she was sentenced to 24 years and a lifetime of probation. Finally, John Allen, he was found guilty of murder in 2017, and he was sentenced to death by lethal injection. The court document stated 11 jurors found that John Allen killed Amy, and 11 jurors found that Allen was a major participant in committing the child abuse that resulted in Amy's death. Finally, the court document said that the jury found John Allen eligible for the death penalty due to 3 aggravating factors. Number 1, he had been previously convicted of a serious offense. Number 2, the murder was especially cruel. And number 3, John Allen, an adult, murdered a child under the age of 15. Given those factors, the jury unanimously decided that John Allen should receive the death penalty despite him pleading guilty and asking for natural life in prison. What a disgusting, disgraceful, contemptible story. They treated this girl like shit. They hated their own lives. They were poor. They were broke. They had no purpose. Maybe Kenneth was right. Maybe they took it out on her because she was the outsider. Is she one of us? Who knows? It doesn't fucking matter. She was 10 years old, you moron. Too many times in America, kids are just dying and dying. Over what? Adults being cowards. Thank you for watching.